Have you ever had a day where you sit quietly by the window, watching the light change and wonder, is this just how things are now? If that question has passed through your mind, even for a moment, you are not alone. So many people over 70 find themselves in a quiet transition, not just in lifestyle, but in identity. The pace has shifted, the roles have changed, and for many, the silence can be both comforting and unsettling. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and stay with me until the end. You might hear something that brings you peace, clarity, or even hope. We're going to explore some of the most common mistakes people make after 70, often without even realizing it. These aren't mistakes in a judgmental way. They're gentle nudges, things we do out of habit or belief that can quietly chip away at our health, happiness, or sense of purpose. And when we see them clearly, we have the power to make small changes that bring big peace. Let's begin with mistake number 1, believing that slowing down is inevitable. Many of us are taught to expect decline with age. We hear it in jokes, in commercials, even from well-meaning doctors. Over time, that message seeps in. We start to move less, dream less, even laugh less, not because we have to, but because we assume it's the normal thing to do. The real issue isn't the physical changes that come with aging. It's the internal decision to surrender to them. I remember speaking with a man named Harold, 76 years old, who used to be an avid gardener. But after a fall 2 years ago, he gave it up. Not because he physically couldn't do it, but because he convinced himself it was too risky. He said, "I'm too old to be puttering around the yard." But when a neighbor gently encouraged him to plant a few herbs in pots on his porch, something changed. It sparked joy. His posture improved. His energy lifted. That tiny act reminded him, slowing down doesn't mean stopping. It doesn't mean joy is off limits. It means we move more mindfully, but we still move. There's powerful science here too. Studies from the National Institute on Aging have shown that older adults who stay physically and mentally engaged through movement, hobbies, and social interaction maintain better cognitive function and emotional health. But it starts with a belief that life isn't over. It's simply evolving. Mistake number 2 is something incredibly common but rarely talked about. Not adjusting your self-care routine as your body changes. Think back to how you cared for yourself at 30 or 40. Maybe you showered every day, stayed up late watching TV, or skipped meals when you were busy. But the body you live in now has different needs. Skin becomes thinner and more sensitive. Overbathing can cause dryness or even skin tears. Staying up too late might disrupt your internal rhythm more than it used to. And something as simple as forgetting to hydrate could affect your blood pressure or energy levels in ways it never did before. A woman named Linda, age 74, shared something that stuck with me. She said, "I kept doing everything the same way I always had, and I couldn't figure out why I felt worse. Then one day, a nurse told me, 'You're not in your 30s anymore. You don't need to shower every day. Your skin needs time to heal.'" That moment changed everything. She adjusted her schedule. She began gentle dry brushing and used warm, not hot, water. She even changed her bed sheets more often because she started sweating at night. A small hormonal shift she hadn't realized was still happening. Self-care after 70 isn't about doing less. It's about doing differently. It's about honoring the body you have now with kindness and curiosity. Whether that means switching to fragrance-free soap, building a nighttime wind-down routine, or simply listening when your body says rest, these shifts matter. They help you feel at home in yourself again. Now, mistake number 3 might be the most quietly damaging of all. minimizing emotional pain because it's seen as a normal part of aging. If you've lost a spouse, a friend, or even just your old routine, it's easy to tell yourself, this is just how it is now. You may feel grief, loneliness, or anxiety, but push it aside. After all, everyone says this stage of life is hard, so maybe it's selfish or silly to feel sad. But the truth is, emotional pain doesn't become less real with age, and healing doesn't become less necessary. In fact, research from the University of California has shown that untreated emotional distress in seniors can accelerate physical decline, increase cognitive symptoms, and raise the risk of chronic illness. The body and the mind are deeply linked. I once met a woman named Joyce at a senior center art class. She was quiet, always smiling politely, but never fully present. One day, after class, she told me she hadn't spoken about her husband's death in 6 years, not with her children, not with her friends. She said, "I thought I was supposed to be over it by now." But grief doesn't follow a timeline. When she finally allowed herself to speak, to paint what she felt, to cry in front of someone, it was as though color returned to her life. Emotional healing isn't indulgent. It's essential. And there is always space at 70, 80, or 90 for joy to return. Sometimes it starts with a conversation, sometimes with a small act of creation, but always it begins with acknowledging what hurts. Each of these mistakes stems from a powerful place, the desire to cope, to adjust, to make sense of change. But sometimes the very habits we use to protect ourselves become the ones that hold us back. The good news is that none of these habits are fixed. With awareness, with tiny steps of self-compassion, they can shift. And when they do, so much light returns. Let's keep going. What comes next might surprise you. And here's another reason these first 3 mistakes matter so deeply. They shape how you see yourself. When you internalize the idea that decline is inevitable, that your needs are less important, or that your feelings aren't valid anymore, you start to shrink your world without even realizing it. You stop reaching out. You stop asking questions. You stop making plans. And slowly, the joy and connection that once felt natural begin to fade. But the truth is, there's no expiration date on growth, no cutoff for healing, no deadline for reinvention. Whether you're 71 or 91, you still have the right and the ability to feel vibrant and valuable. Let's take a moment and reflect on something most people overlook: how the little things shape our days. A warm shower that soothes instead of stings. A simple breakfast that's easy to digest. A short walk that lifts your spirits. A phone call to someone who still lights up when they hear your voice. These aren't just habits. They're reminders that you matter, that your body, your energy, and your heart still deserve care. And let's not forget how isolation feeds these mistakes. When you're alone too often, it's easier to believe your slow pace is permanent, that your sadness is normal, that you have to just deal with it quietly. But connection, real, honest connection, is often the antidote. That's why even just hearing someone say, "Me too," can feel like a lifeline. That's why I'm here, speaking to you now, because someone needs to say it. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. And it's okay to want more, even now. When we stop judging ourselves for having needs, for feeling vulnerable, for craving closeness or joy, we start to live again, fully, freely, even if it looks different than it did before. That's not a loss. That's evolution. There's a man named Paul I once met through a community storytelling group. He was 82, had lost his wife 5 years earlier and said he hadn't laughed, not really laughed, since the funeral. He came to the group reluctantly. "I don't have anything to say," he told us. But someone else shared a silly memory about dancing in their pajamas during a thunderstorm, and Paul laughed, just once, but it cracked something open. The next week, he brought a story. The week after, another. And 3 months later, he was teaching other seniors how to find the humor in their own stories. That first laugh wasn't just a reaction. It was a doorway. That's the beauty of becoming aware of these patterns. The moment you spot them, you can choose again. You can say, maybe I don't have to give up my garden, or maybe I do deserve to talk about how lonely I've been, or even just, maybe I've still got some dancing left in me. And you do. You really do. There's still room for new friendships, new pleasures, new routines, and yes, even new dreams. You don't have to settle into decline like it's the only path forward. You can make gentle, loving shifts, starting today, that slowly reshape how you feel in your body, your home, and your heart. So if you recognize yourself in any of these first 3 mistakes, take a deep breath. Don't scold yourself. Don't rush to change everything overnight. Just notice, gently, and let that noticing become a kind of turning point. You're already doing something powerful. Just by listening, just by being willing to ask, is there another way? And the answer is yes. There is always another way. Let's keep going. What comes next might surprise you. If you've made it this far with me, I want to pause and recognize something. It takes courage to look inward. It takes real heart to ask, am I holding myself back without even realizing it? That kind of honesty is a form of strength, not weakness. So, if anything we talked about earlier stirred something in you, stay with me. Because what comes next might be even more important. There are certain patterns that creep into our lives after 70, not out of laziness or failure, but out of habit, caution, or quiet resignation. They feel like small adjustments at first, but over time, they reshape our world in ways we don't always notice, until we wake up one day and wonder why everything feels smaller. Let's talk about one of the most common of these. Mistake number 4, shrinking your world without realizing it. This one often begins with good intentions. Maybe you avoid a weekly gathering because your hip hurts. Maybe you skip a family event because you don't like to travel alone anymore. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll make it next time. But weeks become months, then years, and slowly, without ever deciding to, you stop showing up. You stop going to the library. You stop calling your cousin. You stop putting on that necklace you used to love. Not because you're sad, not because you've given up, but because you've adapted, gently, quietly, to a smaller version of life. I met a woman once named Eleanor. She was 79, lived in a cozy home filled with books, photos, and tea tins from around the world. When I asked her when she last had someone over, she blinked. "Maybe 2 birthdays ago?" she said. "I guess I just stopped inviting people." But as we talked, I could see it in her eyes. She missed the noise, the laughter, the mess of connection. She hadn't withdrawn because she didn't care. She had simply gotten used to stillness. Her world had become quiet, not by choice, but by momentum. Here's the thing. Shrinking your world doesn't make you safer. It makes you lonelier. And the longer it stays small, the harder it is to remember that there's more out there. But the good news? Expansion doesn't have to be dramatic. It can start with something as simple as saying yes to a walk, answering a phone call, sitting by someone new at lunch, sending a message, even if you're not sure they'll respond. Every time you reach outward, you remind yourself, I still belong. I still matter. I still have something to give. The fear of being a burden often fuels this shrinking. You think, I don't want to impose, or they're busy with their own lives. So you pull back, little by little, telling yourself you're being considerate. But what if I told you that the people in your life miss you more than you know? That they'd rather have an imperfect visit than no visit at all? That your presence, your stories, your voice, your quirks, is something they still want in their world? Sometimes we need to hear that again. You are not a bother. You are a blessing. And that leads us into another quiet habit that holds so many people back. Mistake number 5, thinking it's too late to try something new. This idea creeps in slowly. Maybe you catch yourself saying, I'm too old to learn that, or that's for younger folks. It might seem harmless, but what it really does is close the door on possibility. It convinces you that the best parts of your life are behind you, even when that's not true. Let me tell you about Charles. He was 84 when he walked into an art class for the first time in his life. He said he only came because the room had air conditioning. But something happened that day. He picked up a brush. He painted a bird. Badly, he claimed. But it made him feel alive. He hadn't felt that curious in years. 6 months later, he had filled half his living room with watercolors. I never knew I needed this, he said. I thought it was too late to start. But it was right on time. Starting something new isn't about perfection. It's not about impressing anyone. It's about reminding yourself that you're still capable of growth, that your brain still craves stimulation, that joy can still surprise you. Newness can be small. Trying a new recipe, listening to music from a culture you've never explored, asking someone about their life story, planting something in a pot, even if it doesn't grow. And if the fear creeps in, that you'll look silly, that you won't be good at it, I want you to ask yourself, so what? So what if you're not great at it? What matters is how it makes you feel. If it wakes you up inside, it's worth doing. Mistake number 6, overlooking small physical symptoms. This one might be the most dangerous of all, and yet the most common. It starts with a simple ache in your legs when walking, or maybe you're feeling more tired than usual, sleeping poorly, or getting up at night more often. You think to yourself, well, I'm 75, it's probably just age. And maybe it is. But maybe it's not. So many older adults ignore early warning signs, not because they're careless, but because they've been conditioned to accept decline as inevitable. They don't want to bother the doctor. They're afraid of getting bad news. They don't want to sound dramatic, so they stay quiet. But silence can be costly. A man named Daryl had frequent leg cramps. He brushed them off for nearly a year. When he finally mentioned them during a routine checkup, tests revealed serious vascular issues. If I'd waited another month, his doctor told him, you could have lost that leg. That moment shook him. He said, I wasn't scared of the pain. I was scared of wasting anyone's time. But here's the truth. Your body's whispers are important. Fatigue could mean anemia. Nighttime urination might point to an infection or heart strain. Memory fog could be as simple as dehydration or as serious as early-stage cognitive decline. The sooner you speak up, the more options you have, and the more control you retain. The same goes for emotional symptoms, losing interest in things you used to love, feeling numb, avoiding social interaction. These aren't just normal signs of aging. They're signals, and they deserve to be heard. You are not a complainer. You are not fragile. You are not overreacting. You are wise, and your instincts matter. Carry a small notebook and jot down what you notice. Bring it to appointments. Ask questions. And if one provider dismisses your concern, keep looking. You deserve to be taken seriously. This mindset shift, from passive to proactive, can be life-changing. And it's not about becoming obsessed with health. It's about advocating for your well-being with the same care you'd offer to a loved one. You wouldn't let someone you love suffer in silence. So don't let yourself do it either. When we put these 3 mistakes side by side, shrinking your world, giving up on new experiences, and ignoring your body's messages, a pattern emerges. They all stem from a kind of quiet resignation. The sense that life has narrowed, that energy is fading, that what's done is done. But I'm here to remind you, that's not the whole story. You are still allowed to take up space, still allowed to grow, still allowed to say, wait a minute, I think there's more here for me. Maybe more looks like dancing in your kitchen again, or writing a letter to someone you haven't spoken to in years. Maybe it's joining a class or finally admitting you're lonely and need connection. Or maybe it's simply telling your doctor, I've been feeling off and I'd like to find out why. These are not small things. They're brave things. They're signs that you're choosing life. Full, expansive, engaged life. So if you recognized yourself in any of these mistakes, that's not a failure. That's awareness. And awareness is the first step to reclaiming something precious, your momentum. Take a breath. Put your hand on your heart if it feels right. You're still here, still moving, still full of possibility. Let's not stop now, because what we're about to explore next goes even deeper. It touches your identity, your voice, your sense of purpose, and it may just change how you feel about aging forever. Now, let's continue. If you've stayed with me through this entire conversation, I want you to know something. That means something powerful. It means you're still curious. You still care about how you're living, how you're aging. That desire, that openness, is something to be proud of. So now, let's go even deeper. What we're about to explore are not just habits. They're beliefs, deep ones. The kind that sit beneath the surface and quietly shape how we act, speak, and see ourselves. These final 3 mistakes touch something tender: our pride, our purpose, our voice. Let's begin with the one that so many older adults carry silently. Mistake number 7, not asking for help, out of pride or fear. For much of your life, you were the helper. You worked, you raised others, you showed up for people when they needed you. You didn't ask, you gave. And somewhere along the way, that became your identity. Strong, capable, independent. So when you found yourself needing help, reaching for a steadying hand, struggling with something once easy, it felt like failure, maybe even shame. But let me ask you, would you judge a friend for needing support? Would you think less of someone you love if they needed help carrying groceries or navigating a doctor's visit? Of course not. You'd offer that help with love. So why is it so hard to let others offer it to you? We fear being a burden. We fear being pitied. And sometimes, we fear what help might mean, admitting we've changed, that we can't do everything like before. But accepting help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's trust. It's a sign that you know your value is not in what you can do alone, but in who you are. I knew a woman named Miriam. She was 86, sharp as ever, living alone. One day, her daughter found her on the floor. She had fallen and waited hours before calling anyone. "I didn't want to worry you," she said, But the worry came anyway, just later and deeper. After that, she changed. She let her neighbor walk her to the pharmacy. She let her grandson teach her how to use a fall alert bracelet. And most of all, she let people in again. Not because she'd given up, but because she chose connection over pride. There's a quiet freedom in allowing others to care for you, in letting go of the idea that your worth depends on doing everything alone. You've carried so much for so long. Don't deny others the chance to give something back. Asking for help is not about giving up control. It's about creating safety, community, and love around you, so you can keep living your life fully. Mistake number 8, thinking you're no longer needed. This one seeps in slowly. After retirement, after kids move away, after losses mount, there's often a quiet question that begins to haunt. Do I still matter? And the world, in subtle ways, can make you feel like you don't. You don't see people like you in advertisements. Your opinion is interrupted more. People talk to your adult children instead of you. You're praised for being cute or adorable instead of wise or capable. Over time, that message takes root. You might stop speaking up. You might stop volunteering ideas or initiating plans. You might even stop looking in the mirror with the same pride. Because somewhere deep down, you've started to believe, maybe my part is done. But here's the truth. Your presence is still powerful. The way you hold space in a room, the way you offer perspective, the way your stories carry the wisdom of decades others haven't lived through yet. You are needed, not just in grand gestures, but in everyday things. Listening, encouraging, remembering, reflecting, comforting. You are someone's example of what resilience looks like. I once met a man named Robert who felt useless after his wife passed. She was the social one, he said. I was just the plus one. For months, he stayed quiet, until a neighbor invited him to read aloud at a local school. At first, he was reluctant, but when those kids looked up at him, laughing at his silly voices, asking about his life, something clicked. He started going every week. He said, "They made me feel like I had something again, like I wasn't invisible." Even the smallest moments, saying hello to someone who feels unseen, sharing advice when asked, helping someone laugh when they need it most. Those are reminders that you are not only relevant, you are radiant. There is still someone who needs your smile, your presence, your experience. Don't count yourself out before life does, because as long as you are here, you are a vital part of the story. Mistake number 9, forgetting to advocate for yourself. This mistake is insidious because it often looks like politeness. You don't push back at the doctor who dismisses your concern. You let family decide things for you without asking what you want. You're tired, so you don't speak up when someone assumes you're too old to do something. And slowly, you start to fade, not just from the room, but from your own story. Sometimes it's because you don't want conflict. Sometimes it's because you're tired. Sometimes it's because the world seems to expect you to be quiet, agreeable, low maintenance. But your voice matters, especially now. Advocating for yourself doesn't mean being loud. It means being clear, calm, consistent. It means saying, that medication makes me feel off. What are my other options? It means telling your family, I want to be involved in decisions that affect me. It means asking, why not? When someone assumes you can't or won't. I met a woman named Gloria who changed her life with one sentence. She had been prescribed a medication that made her dizzy. The doctor said it was normal for her age, but she said, It may be normal, but it's not okay with me. That one line led to a different medication, one that didn't make her fall asleep at noon. She got her afternoons back, her confidence, her spark. You are the expert on your own body, your own needs, your own boundaries. And the more you speak them, the more others learn to listen. Never forget that self-advocacy is not selfish. It's self-respect. And it's contagious. When others see you owning your truth, they find permission to do the same. It's okay to ask for a second opinion. It's okay to slow down conversations and say, "I'm not done speaking." It's okay to request more time, more clarity, more care, because your life is your own, and you are not done shaping it. So let's bring it all together. You've walked with me through 9 quiet mistakes, each one understandable, human, and common, but each one also reversible. The moment you see it, you can shift it. The moment you name it, you can reclaim it. It starts with a thought, then a choice, then a small step, and slowly, your world begins to open again. You might still have aches. You might still move slower than before. But inside, you'll feel lighter, braver, more awake to the life that's still unfolding. Because no matter how old you are still allowed to evolve. You're still allowed to want, to ask, to try, to connect, to rest, to grow, to shine. So take this with you. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming. And that is a beautiful thing. And maybe the most important truth of all is this: aging isn't something that happens to you. It's something you get to live through. It's a phase of life that, like any other, offers its own kind of beauty. But to experience it fully, you must stay open. Open to growth, to mistakes, to course corrections, to joy. There's a kind of magic that happens when older adults reclaim their voice. You can see it in their eyes, the shift from resignation to recognition. The sense that, oh, I'm still here, I still matter. That energy doesn't just affect you, it uplifts others. It reminds your children, your neighbors, even strangers on the street, that vitality doesn't have an expiration date. Don't be afraid to take up space, to speak longer than expected, to show up in bright colors, to write your memories down even if no one has asked. Don't wait to be invited into meaning. You're already living it. So as we close this conversation, I want to leave you with a simple encouragement. You are not at the end of your story. You are at a page that deserves to be written with intention, boldness, and love. Start today, not with pressure, but with presence. Begin by noticing where your world feels smaller than you want it to be, where silence has taken the place of your voice, where fear has replaced curiosity, and then, gently, begin to stretch again. Because this life of yours, it's still yours. Still waiting for your energy, your fingerprints, your courage. You're not done. You're just getting started. Again.